Welcome back to another episode of With Sonar. I'm your host, Luke Velasca, and joined by me, another state over and across the internet, is Kyle Taylor. Kyle, how are you doing today?
I am coming at you live virtually from my house. So this is very unique. I don't think we've ever had to do this, to be honest. Even all of the FreightWaves at home, all of the live events we've had, I think we've always been in the office. This is the first time With Sonar is coming from you from a different location. That is
the very first time. And I honestly, it felt a little off from you saying live from Kyle's house. I was really expecting live from Kyle's apartment. For those watching,
Yes.
who follow Kyle on LinkedIn, you know, in the back in the day, he used to always post these Friday posts live from Kyle's apartment. But since you moved into a beautiful new home, we no longer have live from Kyle's apartment.
New year, new me, as the kids say it. So no, that's exactly right. No more live from Kyle's apartment.
That's
That
right.
has such a good. I mean, it just feels right. You're right. It just
It
doesn't.
rolls off the tongue.
Yes, and so
Maybe live
that's the
from
interesting part
Kyle's
of it.
abode.
Right.
I don't know. Something like that. We'll work on it. We'll work on it.
Yeah.
But of course, it's always a pleasure. I'm sitting here in my Airbnb by the beach, looking over things here. So
FreightWaves
you're
is
here in
treating
your
you well,
home.
huh? Vacation in the
Hey,
middle of January. What is that?
I know you. Well, not all of us took 2 weeks off in December. So I decided to take my vacation a couple weeks later.
Yeah,
Hint,
that
hint,
wasn't
nudge,
me.
nudge.
I still work. Well, I mean, you're still working, so no, that's awesome. No, but freight doesn't sleep, as you probably
It doesn't
remember back
sleep.
when you
Three
were
six
working at
five.
a brokerage. It's kind of nice to be in an environment where, fortunately, I don't have carriers calling my phone at 3 a.m. at night. So
Yep,
that
that
is
is
definitely a
nice.
bit. But
There's a benefit of that. I actually remember when I started in my first brokerage job, I started on December 26th, the day after Christmas. It sort of just worked out like that. I told him, like, we did the interview and I was like, yeah, I'll start with as soon as you guys want. Since it's close to January, I assume it'll probably be January. And they're just like, oh no, why don't you just start the day after Christmas? I was like, sure.
yeah,
They're like, we got
that's
stuff for you to do. Like, don't think like you're gonna ease on into this. Like, we got work.
dang. Dang,
So
that's brutal. That's a crash course on training in the freight world, though. Just kind of get after it. Like, here's a
yep.
book of contacts. Go ahead and just start calling. If you need to price someone, that's a on the
Yeah.
job training. We'll just
Just figure
get
it
you a
out.
login.
Make
You can
something
share
up.
Homeboy's login to a load board, and we can figure it
Yep.
out from there. Is that kind of that training methodology you had?
That's really it. I was sitting next to a guy who had a lot of experience, and I was trying to figure out the TMS system while trying to figure out what load boards were. I didn't even know what a load board was. I didn't know what pricing was. I just said, like, he just said, hey, charge them this and try to pay a carrier, this and see what works out. And he just says,
Right.
you'll figure it out.
No. Yeah. Funny thing. So William in the comments on LinkedIn said, "Hey guys, they should let y'all take the presentation screens home with us next time. The ones that you stand next to. Yeah. Imagine if we had those big screens that we had behind us. We could just take those home. That would be perfect. But yeah, well, I'll definitely pitch that to our team. See what they let us do.
That's
But
awesome. That'll
no,
be
that's
something to think
awesome.
about. I like that. I like that. Appreciate the
But
feedback. Keep
so
the questions coming, by the way. We'll take questions throughout the show.
exactly. You guys want to know about, the big elephant in the room? We can do that too. You guys want to talk bikes? You want to talk beach? Luke's at the beach now, but
Wow,
on to
literal elephant
onto
in the
the
room.
freight world though. What's Luke, you kind of been away from it, but what have you heard, January? What's been the mood out in the industry?
Yeah, exactly. I actually had the opportunity to talk to a shipper today. So this was actually exciting, very fresh. And I talked to him a little bit about what was happening with with their bidding process. So this is interesting. I've been talking to a lot of shippers lately, and the feedback I've been getting is a lot of been pushing more towards, a shorter term bid process. Quarterly bids seem to be very, very popular. A shipper that I just brought on as a customer is moving more towards a quarterly bid. That doesn't mean annual bids are completely disappearing. I don't think we'll see those go away completely. And that's partly the conversation I had today with this shipper is rejection rates are still high. They're still having to rely on the spot market a lot more than they have in the past. and really that makes them comfortable for capacity. They don't like that. So they're having to change things up in their network a little bit, be a little more strategic with their thinking. But here's the thing, they don't have the operational capacity, or the hands on deck, or the staff to do multiple bids throughout the year. They don't have that. They don't have that luxury. So they have to do an annual bid. And he said, I would love to do shorter term bids, but he's like, we just don't have the ability to do that. So it's unrealistic. So when our providers start rejecting freight, or they want, bid increases, or rate changes, we have to be flexible in certain situations. Sometimes we have the leverage to say no, but sometimes it's just the reality of it, because I can't just do a full on bid again. We don't have the hands to do that. We're too thin, if you will. So I think that's going to be a major player as volatility starts to kick up, because as more shippers start to move more towards this shorter term bid process, there's going to be a lot of shippers that don't have, the hands on deck to do that. And it might sort of, I shouldn't say it'll create a rift, but carriers, they might start adjusting their processes more towards a shorter term bid. And then they're kind of going to have to also split their efforts for some folks that are doing an annual bid. And this wasn't a small shipper by means either. This is actually a multi-billion-dollar corporation I was talking to. So, it's just because it's a big company doesn't necessarily mean, the transportation department has the bandwidth to go through. So that was a really interesting conversation that I think is good. We're starting to see that more and more as time goes on.
Yeah, and I think something to also put in perspective is the guys over on Great Quarter Guys, Seth and Andrew, they talked yesterday on their sort of podcast about some of the earnings reports that were coming out from Q4, and there's starting to become a trend in these large shippers like Bed Bath and Beyond and all these large retailers, where unfortunately it is what it is, but transportation is getting the blame. Why is our throughput, not exactly what we expected? Well, transportation costs went through the roof. There was factors because of COVID that occurred in 2020 that caused us to go outside of what we budgeted and planned for. And so across the shipper landscape right now, we are seeing that they're hyper aware of what the ways they're planning. And you're exactly spot on. Now, you either have the resources to be able to do these kinds of bids, or you're just kind of doing exactly what you did last year, which is go after an annual bid, start to do one bid, and then try to hope that there's not a ton of volatility, but there's not really a way to measure that outside of just looking at historical, rate volume from last year. But spoiler alert, looking at rate volume from last year is not going to do you any good. So it puts you in a very unique situation to be like, okay, well, obviously the time to put into multiple, let's say, for example, I'm going to do constant procurement runs. I'm going to do quarterly bids. I'm going to, try to implement that so that we can at least try to get some cost savings, because rates, let's be real, rates are really high right now. And we even saw it from the perspective of carriers. Carriers are now starting to print money. There was an article that FreightWaves.com put out. And so that's really showing the fact that since operating ratios on the carrier side are starting to lower, which means they're becoming more profitable, rates are still super high. So locking into rates now is not going to do you much good, especially with the opportunity of rates falling, let's say summertime. I mean, that it sounds like that's exactly what you're hearing as well, Luke.
Exactly. Yeah. And what's important to note too is it's obviously going to be different on different lanes, different areas of the country, right? Different areas will definitely be affected differently. So it's not a one size fits all model, right? And it's going to affect different modes, right? What's happening to dry van is going to be a little different from reefer, right? Which is going to be different from flatbed, and and you have a lot of different modes and different things that are going to be affected. But yes, I mean, I think as a general rule of thumb, everybody is expecting rates to go down at some point, and at some point they probably will to an extent. But I don't know that we're going to see rates just simply drop off a cliff here and go back to where they were on previous levels. Remember, 2019 was a very soft year. We're really only about a year away from, or that wasn't that long ago now, just over a year ago now. We were in 2019. That was a very soft year. And then 2020 became quite a volatile year. And there were some lows in 2020 as well for the transportation sector. Everybody forgets about that, but a lot of transportation companies were very nervous about going out of business there in April and even like the beginning of May. It started to take things off. So I think I don't know that rates will definitely come down in different areas, and maybe some areas they'll remain elevated and maybe even push even higher, right? Because COVID has definitely we keep talking about it, but it's there are going to be lasting effects in the supply chain. And I don't think that we're going to just simply, okay, everybody's vaccinated, everything can go back to normal, whatever that is. There will be lasting effects. And I think we're going to see some of that reflected in transportation, and maybe lanes that historically ran at certain rates may run at different rates in the future, some higher and maybe some lower. So it'll be interesting to see
Right.
how that works out. You've been talking to
Yeah.
some carriers though lately. Tell me a little bit about their, what's their perception of everything? How are they planning for the future?
Well, obviously, they want bids right now. They want bids while they're high. A lot of rate increases were put into place either from late summer to late Q4. So now that we're having, either new bids already being awarded from the end of last year, or we're going into new bids, really carriers are having a lot of opportunities come to them, especially if they had these large books of businesses where they were doing the retail businesses. They were working with consumer packaged good type companies. They were getting more opportunities because volumes are record highs. I mean, William in the comment section, he's in the transportation section of Amazon and based in Canada. He was talking about crazy high volumes that he saw last week, more than what he saw pre-Christmas. And so that's just opportunity right there. So one, you're
That actually
having.
makes sense if you think about it, because William, and William, you obviously know better than I do since you're in the transportation department at Amazon. But if you think about it, a lot of people get gift cards for Amazon or Walmart or anybody. A lot of gift cards happen around Christmas time, so
Yep.
everybody wants to buy those gifts with those. And on top of that, people get gifts that maybe they also want to return. So you kind of have a double whammy there of people buying and people returning. That could really cause a lot of volume increases. Just a quick
Yeah.
anecdotal thought, William. Love to hear your thoughts on that when you get a second. Sorry, Kyle, back to you.
No, that's exactly right though. I mean, I think we talked about that, or not just me and you, but the whole ecosystem of FreightWaves was talking about that, about the reverse logistics of the Christmas battle. So not only do we have the issues with the USPSs, the UPSs, the FedEx, the Amazons of just getting everything fulfilled and to your doorsteps before Christmas. It's okay now. You bought certain amount of goods, or people want to return goods. Now we have to go through the whole reverse logistics of things and trying to resupply people with their orders that they want. So you're not only are you having increase in volume just based on sending orders back to wherever they deem them, especially if it's outside of the their packaging, and maybe it has to go back to the original manufacturer. But now you're having to replace that order, so you're really doubling the order that's needed on that lane. So but back to your original question, what are the carriers saying? It's really opportunities. What I'm hearing is that there's right now is the strategic time to kind of reevaluate your book of business. Carriers are in the driver's seat, pun fully intended. And that means that they can reorganize their triangles. They can, I mean, obviously it's a constant wheel. The big triangle of like, we're going to go from Atlanta to Chicago, Chicago to Memphis, Memphis to Atlanta, and try to continue this circular pattern of whatever routes they have to build densities. This is the opportunities now that they have to ensure that this is going to be profitable when rates start to go back down, because we all know it's going to go down. And from anecdotal and from data we've seen, carriers don't really learn their lesson. They got a lot of money in the pocket. Luke, what's the best bet that they just start going directly and buying more trucks?
Yes. Right, they're
We're
going
not
to go
investing in
buy
that
trucks.
technology.
They're going to go buy trucks. And it's tough to blame them. It really is, because you have this money and now's the time to make the investment, you think, right? And from a bank account perspective, it makes sense. I would personally like to see a lot of carriers kind of save that money for when the market does dip, and then that's the time they go in and they buy that capacity, since to secure it. But in a lot of senses, so it is tough to blame them. Of course, they want to get out there, they want to make their purchases, they want to add to their fleets. But yeah, I mean, it's going to happen. at some point. In fact, we've already started to see new Class 8 truck orders on the rise again. Have been significantly rising over the last couple of months. So I think we'll continue to see that. But again, also keep in mind too, like I feel like we're almost. I don't think it's quite as fair to compare this to the increase that we saw back in 2017 and 2018 when rates were going up to new historic levels and everybody was buying new truck orders, and then that flooded the market because we're seeing truckload volume tender requests at all-time highs right now than we ever have. So there's also more volume. So in some sense, we do need more capacity in the market just to even meet demand, right? One of our customers, we were talking with one of our customers recently, and Schneider, and they said if their tender request dropped by 10%, they still wouldn't be able to service everything. That's how many requests they were getting. So
Right. And so while
it's
you continue on this, let's throw up the volumes historical. So we'll look at really exactly what you're talking about. Tender volumes, and in blue and we're comparing that to last year's volumes, which is in orange. And just look at that. I mean, it's an index value. So, but the index value at 9,600, and we're sitting at right at 14,000. That's insane. I mean, I really wish my portfolio would be like that, but it kind of
come
is.
on, yeah, really.
Everything's just through the roof. But that's so interesting that Schneider said that. And that just is, again, more opportunities. But with opportunities comes a certain pitfall, which is, okay, I'm buying more trucks. How do I seat these trucks? That's something that's being talked about left and right, is that there's so much volume. Naturally, if I'm making, on average $100,000 per driver, let's say, on my fleet per year, then naturally, obviously, I want more trucks. I want to be able to increase that profitability across per truck. And so, but from what we're seeing, it's just not there. The supply for drivers is not there in the schools, and it's really just already becoming, Schneider being one of them, that was already increasing what they would offer at least from a salary perspective of new drivers that they bring on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're absolutely correct. And the thing is since there's so much volume and opportunity, a lot of carriers are having to fight to keep drivers, right? So that driver turnover rate is very high. So and
Yep.
that actually goes to having transparency with your drivers, having data. Everybody talks about you need data for your customers. Well, you as a carrier, you also need data for your drivers as well, so that you can kind of tell them, hey, these are the reason we're making decisions. This is the information we have at hand. But going along with that, Peter Boley, and I apologize if I butchered your last name, but Peter here in the comments section, he said, from a procurement specialist perspective, carriers that wish to abuse the rates will be long remembered.
Yep.
And Peter, I think there's probably a lot of truth to that. And I think, and this goes where to, there's nothing wrong with asking for rate increases, but I think there's a good way of going about it, if you will, right?
Right.
There's a way of just rejecting freight altogether and just say, hey, I'll move your freight, but it's going to cost you. And then there's probably a more productive way of saying, listen, like maybe I can honor the volume that you have in front of me, but any excess, we're going to have to talk about a new rate for that.
Yeah,
So,
which is probably how a lot of these, especially the large national carriers, are approaching that. And
yeah,
I mean, the point of the show is obviously to showcase the value of Sonar. It's obviously in the name, with Sonar, and
with
so
Sonar.
with Sonar, and so one topic that we brought up last week that got a lot of feedback on LinkedIn, which was like, having a unified data, does that hurt a certain party over another? And I think in this perspective, especially because we're taking the note from, how shippers are going to identify risk and identify volatility moving forward throughout the year, this is when you got rate increases last year. Well, now if those shipping or those procurement specialists, when they come back around for bid, yeah, they may do 2 or 3 rounds, and that's going to continue to drive that cost down.
Absolutely. And just to kind of give a shout out here to someone on the comments on the Facebook side of thing, Donald Maher, again, apologize if I'm mistaking your last name there, Donald. So he says one of the problem with low driver volume is due to DMVs are closed, so CDL schools are closed, all due to the social distancing, or they can't take as many students. Carriers are paying more, and drivers can also afford to take time off. And
Right.
so basically, the flood of new students coming into the market to be drivers has really slowed down or even come to a halt in some
Wow.
cases. Donald, that's great perspective. Thank you for that.
And to
And
that point,
that
Luke,
coupled with the chart that we just saw on
right.
Sonar, if we want to throw that up again, right, you can see how elevated these volume requests are by shippers. That blue line there is where current volume requests are from shippers. And again, compare that to the orange line, which is the year over year change. So that would be a year prior. So if you have all these factors to consider with, you have rates going up, you have so that's increasing turnover. You have less drivers coming out of school, so less new bodies to fill the seats, and volume is going up. I mean, that's like the ultimate double triple whammy, if you will.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so let's also throw up the our tender rejection compared to the truck stop rate per mile. And so actually this is a good one as well, looking at that volume. And so what this is looking at is the amount of volume, which is in blue, compared to the amount of turn down or carrier rejection. So that carrier sentiment in the market on a percentage base. And so we're seeing it right at about a 22%, really low compared to late December, but it's all relative. I mean, there's still so much volume. There's still, I mean, above 20 rejection level is really starting to is really insane for what we're used to. And if you even look back at the front of that chart, pre-August, rejections were down to like low 15, 16s. And so, just because we saw this drop doesn't necessarily mean we're going to see that reflected on the rate per mile.
Exactly. Yes. No. And that's beautiful. And something that this tells me here, while this still shows that tender rejections are elevated, which means capacity is still extremely tight, which we would expect with volumes as high as they are. But additionally, it also, as it is going down directionally, we can assume that carriers are less reliant on that spot market freight to keep their wheels moving, and they're beginning to become a little more closely aligned with their contracts to keep their wheels moving, or they're going back to their contract freight. Still doesn't mean the market is loose by any means. It's still very tight, but that does tell me over the last 10 days or so, or last 2 weeks rather, that is the trend that we have been seeing. So, and Kyle, this goes to something that you and I were talking about earlier, is if you're a carrier, you want to you want to like lock in a bid now, but if we're seeing tender rejections still as high as they are, that might give us a little indication that, well, maybe a lot of bids haven't been renegotiated yet, or maybe just a few have. And that's why we have seen tender rejections come down a little bit, but they're still holding very high levels because a lot of bids haven't happened yet. Maybe shippers are trying to hold off until rates do come down.
Yeah, I mean, so the exposure of our data is to the contracted market. So for people who
Right.
aren't aware of, where we get this tender data from, this is looking at the contracted side of the market. It accounts for about 85% of truckloads that are moving on that side. And so that puts into perspective that when these bids do begin to happen, there will be a little bit of an influx of more acceptances because there's been a renegotiation. And it's to our point that if you've watched What the Truck, or seen our guy Michael Vincent, the dude, he used to be in a sales role and really taught me and you when we were coming up, because we came into FreightWaves roughly around the same time, is that you can't rely on one single data set.
Yep.
And so what that'll eventually prove to you is that you still need to rely on that supply and demand. So that's the reason why we were looking at not only the volumes, but the tender rejections on top of that. But it's actually extremely interesting to see that. And I'm sure we'll see it related in the tender rejection data sets. But until then, it's really starting to plateau, and it's continuing to go up. It's a very interesting model. And so when we talk about volatility, as we look down to Q1, I mean, it's really anyone's game at this point, and there's only one real way to try to score something, as if we had something, Luke. Oh man, if I had something
Segue.
that could help me look at volatility in an objective way, I wish there was almost something like a lane scorecard. So that's going to be the perfect segue. But no,
Oh
it's
man.
something that I talked to a number of shippers about, and this is we talked about earnings reports. How do we start to get that money back? I mean, I talked to a shipper the other day who doesn't have an insanely large transportation spend, probably about 50 to 70 million in annual transportation, and he got told to get a 10% cost savings for 2021. 10%, $5 million is what he's been asked to get. Can you believe that? And so it becomes, and I'm sure he's not the only one.
Honestly, if I was a carrier right now or even a broker, what I would be doing is I would be going to the shippers because rates are so incredibly elevated. Most lanes have seen significant increases, 30, 40, 50, 60% increases in spot rates this over the last year. Some lanes have even seen triple digit increases this year. I would be going to a lot of my shippers and just saying, listen, for your contract rate, why don't I get something locked in for you now? I'll lower the rates for where they are right now by 5 or 10%, and we can see if we can make it happen. That way, you're already lowering your shippers cost from where things are today, so they're automatically getting a decrease. And then you are making a bet that down the road rates will go down, which more than likely they will. But it allows you to gain a little bit extra market share from your shippers. And shippers may like that because they really need to lower their costs from last year, or at least for where rates were in this last quarter, especially. And you might have some that are willing to do that, and you just have to find the ones that's very valuable to them. But to your point, lane scorecard that's on the screen here right now, a little bit small for folks, so you might have to zoom in a little bit if you're on your phone or something or on your computer. But Kyle, walk us through this a little bit here specifically. I think we're going to look at the lane score or the volatility score, which are the two numbers there after the column that says van, right?
Yes, no, that's correct. So it's really the right half of this page. So what this tool does, it's another aspect of the product suite of Sonar. And so what this gives you the ability to do is upload your lane profiles. So it's really just your zip to zip pairings, so that you can see how have rates on our predictive model changed from today versus this time last month, and then looking at from today forward looking to this time next month. And it's a very interesting way to look at it, because it's the only way to look at the forecast. How do we start to predict where things are going? And then as we jump into the volatility metric, which is that top one, starts with it's a 66, and then some of these low ones that are 8 scores. So the score is a 1 to 100. We're really looking at how much fluctuation does that price have on average over the time sequence you select. Within this app, you can do 1 month all the way up to 12 month. We're personally looking at a 1 month chart right now. And so this gives us a really good way to understand, okay, is there a high volatility on this lane? Forecast it into the next month. And you can quickly identify, especially for a shipper, let me identify which lanes are going to give me the most headache, and then I can start to develop a strategy. We talked about all these earnings reports, all these CFOs coming to their transportation department to say, hey, it's time to put up or shut up. We're going to try to really cut some costs this year. And this is how you do it. You don't just do it in a blanket. You don't just shotgun method it. You just use that sniper approach to say, okay, here are times that rates are going to be going down, and here are times that we were predicting that rates are going to be going up. So in those situations, I'm going to try to lock in rates with these areas that the rates are going up. I'm going to try to lock in rates right now. If that's just a phone call, if that's just, hey, over the next month, I'll give you this lane. If we could just lock this in. And then these lanes that are going down, you could see, those are the times I'm going to just test it out. Rates go down. I don't want to be subjected to paying a higher premium on that lane when rates do go down. And we all know the broker isn't going to come to me and tell me, hey, I'm overcharging you for freight, so here's some cost savings. That ain't going to happen. We all know that. But yeah, this is a really good way to identify that and be able to download it and make some really good prescriptive approaches with it. And we're already seeing that within our customer base, loving this. So, I mean, Luke, take me a little bit through the other data set, which was the lane score. That's kind of like the sister of the volatility score.
Absolutely. And we're getting close to the end of time here. So I'll run through this quickly. But basically, the lane score there, which is the column next to volatility, again, it's on a scale from 1 to 36. Don't worry about the numbers. But in short, what it's doing is it's telling you, it's ranking your lanes based on almost a desirability score for a truck. So the lower scores, those lanes would have a higher desirability for a truck to go there, meaning let's pick somewhere, right? So we're looking at that. Let's look at, so LA to Seattle. Not a surprise there. There's nothing that surprising about it, but it tells you based on the options out of LA compared to the options out of Seattle once you get there, right? It tells you how desirable is it for a truck to take that lane. So it scores it for you. And that score is actually a forecast for the future. You can forecast it up to 12 months out, right? Or you can do shorter periods of time. But again, it gives you that visibility. So as a carrier, you can figure out maybe where there's a very low desirability score, right, where carriers don't want to go, and that's going to cost shippers a lot of money. You have the
Right.
ability to say, you know what, that's actually, I know it's a backhaul for most folks, or I know that's a head haul for most folks, but for us, it's a backhaul lane. We can use that to our advantage. Or as a shipper, kind of on the flip side, knowing where you have leverage to negotiate up or down, right? Knowing which
Yep.
areas you're going to be exposed to capacity shortages when the market does tighten, right? So it's all about just understanding your network, where you are strong and where you have maybe you're a little weak or have areas of opportunity. So, anyways, it's been a great show. We're wrapping up here. We only have a little bit of time left, folks. Thank you so much online for your comments. Um,
Yes.
Thank you again. There, it's been great, Kathleen. I see your question there. I'm sorry we didn't have time to talk more about
She
driver
loved the
shortage and stuff.
elephant in the background, so that
But
was
she
perfect.
did love the elephant, which is fantastic. Thank you all for that. In the meantime, folks, thank you also for entertaining us while I'm here at the beach in my Airbnb. Kyle is at his home here. We made it work. I'm doing this off on my phone. And folks, have a fantastic rest of your week. We will be back at it, fingers crossed, in the studio next week on Wednesday. Have a fantastic rest of your day, everybody.